Hey everyone, welcome back to our series of pro tips and tricks from Fauna in Focus. We're just wrapping up the end of a series of lessons on Google Sheets, including some formulas and some special little tips and tricks that I've been giving on how to set up some spreadsheet tools that make your life easier. So just before we finalize it, so just to recap what we've learned so far, in the first lesson, we learned how to set up a very basic expense sheet or a budget sheet, in which case we were essentially calculating, multiplying the cost of the unit times the number of units to get a total. We also, after doing the basic version of that, we learned how to use an array formula, which is a really cute little trick to basically send your formula infinitely down forever. Right? So even though you can see here in these empty spaces, there's nothing selected, the second I enter something over here, it starts to do some math, right? And so I put $1 here, but of course I've got my units needs to be filled as well. So if I have $1 and I have 1 unit of that, it's going to be a grand total of $1. But if it's empty over here, then absolutely nothing happens. It's totally empty. And this is useful because then we don't end up with error messages or NA messages, or any sort of text formula failure text that appears in some cells sometimes. And one of the tricks to do that is by combining an array formula, which will send it down, with this if is blank condition. So an if is blank is basically going to look at certain cells. In this case, we're looking at G3 and to the rest of G, and we're looking to see if it's blank. And if it is blank, we're going to return nothing. And so the nothing is the in between these two quotation marks. If it's not true, we're going to multiply our G and H columns, and you'll notice that we always send the cell all the way to the bottom. So it's G3, but then also to the rest of G, and H3, but also to the rest of H. And that way it's basically, it knows that it needs to calculate this downward forever. That formula is entered one time, and everything below it is not actually a formula. It's just the result of that array formula being in the top cell. And so you never need to drag this formula down like that, right? It's just, it exists there in the top cell, and it's automatically populating the rest of the cells below it with the condition about the blank cell condition. So that's a very useful trick that we did in the first lesson. We also learned in the second lesson how to set up this calendar system over here, where you can just double click, and that will allow you to open a calendar like this. And for the use of our charts that we're going to make later, we have automatically generated the day, the month, and the year based on that calendar entry, right? So we can just click a button over here, and it will actually enter a date, and it will automatically populate these 3 cells. And how is it doing that? Well, first of all, you know it's an array formula because when I click in here, there's nothing here. I can delete this, and nothing happens. And when I go in and I enter that date, it automatically populates it. So it really doesn't matter what you do with these blank cells. The array formula is there at the top, waiting to work. And in this case, what is the formula that we're using? Well, again, we're using an if is blank formula. In this case, it's going to look in B to see if this is empty or not. If it's empty, it's going to do nothing. It's just going to give a blank result. If it's not empty, and you'll see, look at that, that's another cool thing. Those numbers chase each other around because of that formula, right? I don't have to worry about these formulas skewing by dragging something around. Okay, so that's a really useful trick. All right. So what is happening with these day, month, year formulas? Well, super easy. The formula that we're actually doing if this date is not empty is we're doing a day calculation. So day B3 to B, and again we write it like this because we're wrapped within an array formula wrapper. And so that is actually going to calculate the day based on this date that we've entered, and it will do the same for month and year. So super easy to set that up. We've also learned that we can hide these cells because we don't actually need them. It's only useful for the formulas that we're going to do later. So I'm going to hide those columns. So now our staff and our team members, they just need to enter the date by double clicking, and that's all they need to worry about, right? And again, this is all done by using conditional formatting. So you go to Format, Conditional Formatting, not conditional formatting, by using data validation. We're going to get into conditional formatting later. So you set the conditional formatting to a date, and then when they double click on these cells, they have this pop-up calendar, which is very useful and easy to navigate. All right. I also suggest always adding a receipt code, just so that you can match your expenses or your income to a particular code number. So in this case, I've got year and receipt number, and then I would actually write those numbers on the back of each receipt, so they're easy to find, easy to organize, and easy to match. All right. Then in later lessons, oh, by the way, whenever you add a conditional format in, don't forget to go up here and go to data, conditional formatting, data validation, and remove that validation so that you don't have those little red lines everywhere. So then we talked about tagging things to particular categories. So we came up with these various categories that we can fill out using data validation again. And so each one is actually just a data validation based on our available drop-downs menus, which we have set up over here on this drop-down lists. So we've got these various different drop-down options that we are constantly referencing to make it easier for us to not have spelling mistakes or typos that would mess with our actual data. This is a very useful trick to make sure that everything is counted accurately without having to worry about an extra space or an extra letter or something not written exactly the same way as before, messing with your data. So it literally won't allow you to type it wrong. You literally have to just choose from a list of available options, or you can even just start typing and it will give you some options of what to click. Okay? We've got yes and no options. We've got our staff selection, all just done using that basic data validation trick, using our drop-down menus over here. All right? Then we went into developing a vertical lookup practice. And so in this case, we practiced vertical lookup by doing this grapes and pineapples and pears, this fruit game. And so first we went to our drop-down and we added the available options and the cost of each item. Okay. Then we came over here and we added pineapples, pears, and again, that's just coming from that same drop-down, and you'll notice that it's automatically using the array formula wrapper plus the if is blank wrapper. That way, when it's down here and it's empty and there's nothing over here, nothing is filled out. However, when you go ahead and plug something in, it automatically starts running that formula. All right. What is the formula that we're running? Well, we're doing a vertical lookup where it's looking at A2 to A, and that's again because we're in an array formula. We have to write it like this. We can't just write A2. So it's going to look at A2 to A, so that's going to look at this cell and then the rest of A column. And it's going to look at drop-downs. It's going to look at two columns, G to H. So where's drop-downs G to H? It's here, G and H. And of these two columns, it's going to return the result of the second column, column number 2. And we can see that because over here I've written 2. And then false is going to make sure that it's sorted, or is not sorted. And what that is going to do is it's going to automatically return the result of that number. So it's automatically saying, oh yeah, pineapple, that's $3. If you wanted pears, that's only $1. If you wanted strawberries, those are 75 cents. And then we've just set up this very simple multiplier where it's basically going to say how many units of that are you getting. And it's doing the same. If it's blank formula, it's doing nothing. But otherwise, it's going to take that B2 number and multiply it by the C2 number. And then because we're in an array formula, we send it all the way down. And so that was our practice run on this. And you can imagine different uses for this in your ticketing systems, or if you have different prices for different items, all sorts of different uses for a VLOOKUP. And so then we went ahead and we made our categories total, our fundraising, funding source total, and our project totals. So we made these 3 new sheets here. And we did it all from basically one cell. And the cell that we did it from is right here. So what we're basically doing here is we're setting up a chart that will look at A2, so this column here. And if it's blank, then it's going to return nothing. But if it's not blank, it's going to use a formula called SUMIFS. And SUMIFS is basically going to take a bunch of sums and add them together if multiple conditions are met. So in this case, the first thing that we fill out in SUMIF is the range to actually sum. And so in that case, we're going to sum expenses II, which is, if you remember, that is our total cost column. All right. The next thing it's going to do, it's going to look at expenses JJ and look for the thing that is in A2, which is film project. So JJ, if you look at J, is project name. So it's looking here in this column J for this, A2. It's looking for whatever is in A2. And then finally, it's also going to look in expenses D, which is the number column for the month, and it's going to be looking for the number 1, which represents January, okay? And then we basically take that same formula, we lock the various positions that we need to lock with the dollar signs, and we copy that by dragging it all the way over to December, and then all we do is we manually go through and we change number 1 to number 2 at the end there, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way up until December for 12, and that's done. Then we take that whole thing and we drag it down, and that automatically will adjust the A2. The A will stay the same, but the 2 will become 3 and 3, and then 4 and 4, and so it's looking for whatever is over here, and that is now automatically going to be applied across all of this. So it takes very little time once you set up that first formula to create this whole entire chart. The total is self-explanatory, so that's just going to be equaling the sum of this entire bit, January to December. Quarter 1, quarter 2, quarter 3, and quarter 4 is just the 4 quarters of the year. So the first one is going to sum the first 3, so on for quarter 2, quarter 3, quarter 4. Monthly average is just going to be the total divided by 12 months. And so that's going to come from here. And then all of that can just get dragged down. And the totals is going to be very easy. So that's just going to be a sum of everything above it. And that goes across the entire way, except for average, which you should actually just have it do the totals divided by 12 again. So once we had this set up correctly in the first sheet, then we actually just duplicate these sheets, right? So in the first one, everything here is looking at column J, which is going to give us the project name. For the category, we need to look at expenses K. So all we need to do is actually just do a find and replace by selecting this entire area here, right? From January to December, that whole block, we need to do a find and replace. And we're going to basically replace expenses JJ with expenses and then the column name that we want it to look for instead. So in this case, it was KK, which we've already done. So that's all done. And then we need to make sure that we've searched within the formula to find all those for formulas. All right. So, then to do it again over here for funding source, that column J becomes column M. And so again, we're looking at here. J, we're looking for project name. K, we're looking for category. And M, we're looking for funding source. Okay? So that's what we did in that section there, is we made these 3 columns, these 3 tables. And then we're going to now combine our VLOOKUP with our categories, with our project total sheet. And so we made this dynamic table down here, right? And so what this table is doing is it's using VLOOKUP to look above at the chart directly above. So in this case, you'll see this one is VLOOKUP, and it's looking at charts B2. So what is charts B2? Well, it used to be right here. It was just a simple button that allows us to select one of these options. And so let's go look at what charts B2 is. So here's charts, and here's B2. So charts B2, right now it just says totals, but you'll see it's actually data validation. It's a list of available options that can change. And so that's just done by setting data validation, and you'll notice that it's a list from a range, and the range that it's selected is project totals A2 to A21. So let's go see where we're actually validating this from. So project totals A2 to A21. So this little cell here, that little cell that I showed you, is a toggle switch that allows you to choose between any one of these categories. And that happens to now live over here in charts B2. So this column right here, this vertical lookup, is going to look at what is in charts B2. That's the search key. It's looking for that word. And then where is it looking for it? It's looking for it in this range, this purple range here. And so in this case, we select the whole block here. And then because January is in the second column, we're doing a vertical lookup and we're matching it to the second column here. So this film project for January is going to be the second column in this giant range. February will be the third column, March will be the fourth column, and so on. And we set false to make sure it's not sorted. And so if you look at our formulas here, the only thing that's changing is the column that's being returned. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, all the way over to our final monthly average. And this whole chart here changes dynamically when you change this button. And the reason that's so useful is because this table is based on the data in this chart right there. And that chart can change. And so the table, the chart is linked to this table, and so the table can change, which means if you change that button, this table changes, and when this table changes, the chart also changes. And so that's a super cool way of visualizing your information. And that pretty much wraps up the review of everything we've done so far. What we're going to do now is make everything look a little bit prettier. So we're going to end the project with a little course on how to tidy this all up and make it look a bit nicer. All right, so we'll catch you guys in that one.